Is it a good idea to try to profit from your alt media content on sites like YouTube or Daily Motion or Facebook or whatever you happen to be on? Um, you ultimately have to decide that for yourself. It's certainly attractive to put up all your content. People watch your videos, and then the money just rolls in. And some people can actually make a lot of money with this, like this guy in the picture. But is it a good idea? I'm going to suggest that it might not be, and I'm going to show you why. I love history. I'm particularly interested in Chinese history, and I read a couple of books once. I read these two books. One is Wild Swans by Jung Chung. Uh, Chung was she's the younger woman on the cover here of the three. She grew up in China under Mao, and her parents were communist revolutionaries, and she was actually one of the Red Guards in the Cultural Revolution. And it's an absolutely fascinating read. Very thick book, but wonderful book. It's a must read for anybody who has any interest at all in China. Here's another one if you love history and you want to know anything at all about Chairman Mao. This is the best book, I think, in existence on Chairman Mao, also by Jung Chung and her husband. Um, what I'm about to tell you basically comes from my recollections of reading those books and also just from the Wikipedia article, which I will reference right now. The 100 Flowers campaign. This was something that Chairman Mao did in 1956. Chairman Mao took control of China in 1949. Um, Between 49 and 56, things were not really all that bad in China. What you think of as the horrors of communist China had not happened yet. The first real horror of communist China was the Great Leap Forward, which was an agricultural and industrial revamping of the country that ended really, really badly and resulted in a famine that killed probably 20, 30, 40 million people. Nobody really even knows how many. The second horror of communist China under Mao was the Cultural Revolution. Nobody knows how many people died in that either. Both of these were really hellish times to be in China. What made those possible was the 100 Flowers campaign because prior to the 100 Flowers, Mao had some opposition. There were people in the intelligentsia, the arts, and sciences, and just regular people who had a brain and could think. People who were not really totally on board with what Mao was doing. And he wanted to find out who these people were. And so he, uh, uh, as they say here in the fourth line here in this Wikipedia article, he encouraged citizens to openly express their opinions of the communist regime. A lot of these opinions were very constructive, patriotic opinions. But once he figured out who these people were, he killed them, marginalized them, fired them, sent them off into concentration camps or re-education through labor camps and stuff. It was very, very harsh. Um, it was pretty brutal. There is a picture of his anti-rightist campaign here. Uh, yeah, they would stick you up publicly and denounce you. Now, this to a lot of Westerners may not be like some form of torture or something, but remember, this is a culture where loss of face is a humongous deal, and this guy was probably wishing he was dead. Um, this is a very big deal, and this happened to a lot of people. When Mao could figure out who you were and you weren't completely, just totally brainwashed and on his side and willing to go along with whatever, then this is what he did to you. And the 100 Flowers campaign was how he did it. He encouraged dissent. He let 100 flowers bloom and 1,000 schools of thoughts contend, or something like that. And then uh, once he knew who his enemies were, he whacked them. Now, could the same thing happen again today? Oh yeah, oh yeah. You have to wonder why it is that that people can post um, things about the Rothschilds, the deep state, the Clintons, just, pick whoever, why it is that we can post pretty much whatever we want to about these people and these movements on things like YouTube, Daily Motion, or Steemit, or whatever, and nothing happens to you. Your life goes on just normally. Your door doesn't get broken down, and you don't get dragged off in the middle of the night to a concentration camp and have your throat cut and thrown into a mass grave or something. That doesn't happen to you. I'm not aware of that happening to anybody. But when you put videos on the internet that the powers that be may not like, remember, these people also control the intelligence apparatus in the U.S. and the West in general, and they're very linked with internet companies. We'll say that people who provide content on the internet. If they want to bad enough, they can find you, and when you give them a lot of information about how to find you, then that makes you the low-hanging fruit. Now, if you take some reasonable precautions when you post your content and when you start a channel, not giving any confidential or private information about your actual identity, when you use maybe a different MAC address on your device, that's MAC address, and research that if you don't know what it is, or if you're not spoofing your MAC address, if you're using the same device to post content that you do for your own personal email, if you're giving out your regular phone number or the country you live in, your job, or even if you're leaving the battery in the device that you use to upload your content, it makes it an awful lot easier for them to find you, and it's probably not that difficult. So just take some reasonable precautions. Basically, look into what Edward Snowden said about how to go dark, and then do that to the greatest extent possible. Get a VPN. This may sound paranoid, and it may ultimately never matter, but if our world goes the way that communist China did in this 100 Flowers campaign and the things that came later, if you took these precautions, you'll be glad you did. It may buy you're ultimately not ever going to be able to hide your identity completely, but it may buy you some time because you're not the low-hanging fruit, and you may have the opportunity to get to a safer place than where you were originally if the stuff really hits the fan. So this is just some stuff to think about, because when you do something like maybe monetize your video on YouTube, I don't know how they can pay you without some sort of information about how to find you. It would be nice if there were a different way to do it, but I don't really think that there is. I think that they're going to be able to track you somehow. So you just have to think about all this stuff, and is it worth it? Yeah, you can make some pretty near free money, by monetizing, but it may cost you later depending on what you're posting. So it's just something to think about. Call me paranoid, but it's I think it's pretty good food for thought. So why be reckless? Just go about this as cautiously as you can if you're going to post content that the powers that be may not like, and it may help you to live a longer and healthier life than you otherwise would. So anyway, ultimately it's your decision. Do what you want, but this is just a thought. Thanks.